Good morning, honorable judges, fellow FFA members, and guests. My name is Jennifer Cronin.
And I'm Phil Bankley.
We are representing the Lapeer County FFA chapter. Today, we'll be presenting a demonstration entitled Maple Syrup Production from Tree to Table. Honorable Timekeeper, we are ready to begin.
It's that time of year again, where the sweet aroma of boiling sap will be in the air. Maple syrup farmers all over the state are preparing for another year of harvesting precious sap from the famous maple tree. Maple syrup is among the oldest natural food products produced in North America. Native Americans are credited with the discovery of this flavorful natural sweetener. Maple syrup is defined as sweet syrup made from the sap of maple trees. Hello, my name is Mr. Maple, and this is Miss Sap. We are owners of the Sugar House. We are a small, local business that produces maple syrup for your use. Here, we give out local tours of our production facilities. In our tour, we will show preparation for the harvesting season, correctly tapping the tree, different ways of collecting maple sap, processes for cooking sap down, and finishing of this pure, natural product.
Hello, and welcome to the Sugar House. We hope you enjoy our tour and extend your knowledge of the production of maple syrup. First of all, we need to purchase and organize all of the equipment required to have a successful harvest. Taps, buckets, filters, storage tanks, jars, and a batch evaporator are at the top of the list. You can purchase these items at your local maple syrup equipment distributor. These are the most basic materials you would need to produce maple syrup if you wanted to start your own business. The Sugar House uses this equipment and more. Just come along with us and we will show you all of the equipment and processes required in the production of maple syrup.
Next, we need to tap the tree to collect the sap. This is usually done mid to late February or early to mid-March. The exact time depends on location, elevation, and the weather. If you're located farther south in lower elevation, the time to tap the tree tends to be earlier. If you're located more north and higher elevations, tapping usually begins later in the season. The weather also needs to be right because if a thaw has not yet occurred, the sap will not have a high foliage rate. In cold climates, maples store starch in their trunks and roots before the winter. The starch is then converted to sugar that rises in the sap when warm weather begins. The sap will usually flow for 6 to 8 weeks, or as long as the freezing nights and warm days continue. Now that you know when to tap the tree, you need to know the right tree to tap. There are 13 native maple species in North America. While all of them may be tapped, sugar, black, and red maples provide most of the commercial maple syrup produced in North America. Sugar maple is the best tree to tap because it provides the highest level of sugar. This tree is identified by its grayish bark, dark-colored sharp buds, and its 5-lobed leaves. Black maple has similar sap qualities to the sugar maple tree, therefore it is treated the same. Red maples are the least tapped out of the three because of lower sugar concentration.
The minimum suggested tree diameter for tapping is 10 inches in diameter, measured at about 4.5 feet above the ground. You'll want to use a 7/16 or a 5/16 inch diameter drill, which are used for two different spouts, in a hand brace or breast drill. Drill into the trunk of the tree in an area that contains sound wood, free of scars, wounds, or older tap holes. The height of the tap should usually be 2 to 3 feet for easy access. However, the height can vary. If a tree has been tapped previously, locate the new tap hole 6 inches laterally and 24 inches vertically from this spot. You want to drill 2 to 2.5 inches into a slight upward angle for higher flowage rates. Check the shavings after you drill the hole to make sure it has a light or cream color. This indicates live, healthy sapwood. Now, you may tap the spile or spout into the tree by using a rubber mallet or a hammer.
Collection of the maple sap is next. There are many ways and techniques used to collect maple sap. The simplest way and oldest is using buckets and bags. These are usually used by hobby producers. Plastic tubing is used more often in large corporations or businesses where maple syrup is produced in larger quantities. Free flow tubing is used when gravity can pull the sap to the storage tank. These are usually used where it's hilly terrain. To set up this system, you will have to use the right tap, which a tube can be pushed on. This tube is then hooked up to the main sap carrying tube. You will set it up so the main tube is going down a hill to a storage tank. There can be many tap maple trees that can hook up with the main tube. When gravity cannot pull the sap to the needed destination, a pump is used. Sap flow all depends on the weather. Some days, no sap will flow due to no change in temperature and lack of sunlight. Other days, as much as a quart to a gallon of sap may flow from each spout. The sap will usually flow for 6 to 8 weeks, or as long as the cold nights and warm days continue. The sap should be collected as soon as possible and begun to be made into syrup to prevent spoiling. Since the sap can spoil just as easy as milk, it should be refrigerated at temperatures around 35 degrees Fahrenheit. During periods of cold temperature, the sap, if needed, can be stored in sealed tanks outside for a few days if the temperature is at or below 35. But it is best to boil the sap as soon as possible.
Now it is time to create this delicious natural sugar, maple syrup. Before you even begin the process of creating this syrup, you want to filter the sap to rid of any twigs or debris that could have ended up in there. The easiest way of doing this is using a lightweight fabric because it allows the sap to easily go through, while twigs and debris cannot. Usually, it takes about 5 gallons of sap to produce just 1 pint of maple syrup. Now, there are 3 commercially used maple syrup processing techniques, which are continuous evaporation, batch evaporation, and reverse osmosis. Most large commercial producers use the continuous flow evaporation process for creating their maple syrup. This method is the most common and cost-efficient for converting sap into delicious syrup. The evaporator pans for this process are designed so that sap is added to the pan at one end and syrup is removed at the other. The evaporator pans work by using one large pan that is divided into several sections, separating the more concentrated sap from the more dilute. A heat source is then applied to the entire pan evenly. Sap is then poured until there is about 2 inches in the bottom of the pan. As the water evaporates, the sap progresses through the pan until it reaches the end and comes out as maple syrup. Reverse osmosis is typically used for the desalination of salt water, but can be applied to the processes of making maple syrup. Reverse osmosis, or hyperfiltration, is the process of filtering sap at high pressures through a semi-permeable membrane that traps the concentrated sap while allowing water to pass through. The use of reverse osmosis allows approximately 75 to 80% of the water to be removed from the sap. This method will not create the finished product of maple syrup and will still need to be finished by an evaporation system. But reverse osmosis will save great amounts of energy and time. Most hobbyists use batch production, which is very simple because all you have to do is put some sap into a pan over an open flame. For our demonstration, we will be using this method to create our maple syrup. First, we add sap and begin boiling it. the water evaporates, new sap will have to be added to take its place. This process continues until enough sap has been cooked down to make one batch of maple syrup.
Next is one of the hardest parts of producing maple syrup, finishing. All these processes requires the almost maple syrup to be boiled down to the perfect amount. To begin the finishing process, the adding of sap should stop. As the heat continues, the almost maple syrup's temperature will rise to about 7.1 degrees above the boiling point of water, which is 212 degrees Fahrenheit. The boiling point varies depending on altitude and weather. Sometimes this process will work better on a controlled fire, such as an oven surface or propane heat source. This way is mostly used by hobby producers and is used by our business. We'll have to move the pan to the designated area, but if the syrup does not fill the whole bottom of the pan, you will need to put it into a smaller container. The thermometer should never be touching the outsides or the bottom of the pan, because the temperature of the pan is different from the actual liquid. The syrup must be monitored very closely so it does not get scorched or go beyond the desired density. A maple syrup hydrometer is used to measure the density of maple syrup. The desired density is at least 66 bricks, 66% solids, and not much more than about 67 to 67.5 bricks. Less than 66 is not legally maple syrup, and higher over 67.5, sugar crystals are likely to form. The easiest way to find the density is to take a scoop of the syrup with a heat resistance cup and put the hydrometer into the cup. The hydrometer will float higher as the syrup thickens. If this measurement comes in between 66 and 67.5, the maple syrup is ready to take off the heat source and begin filtering.
Once the maple syrup has reached its proper temperature and density, it should be filtered to remove a gritty material called sugar sand or knitter before hot packing into containers. Maple syrup should be filtered while hot through a clean filter material such as wool. Allow the hot maple syrup to run through the filter into another container. Complete this process as much as needed to eradicate all unwanted material. After you are done filtering this syrup, you can begin bottling this sweet syrup. There are vast varieties of storage containers that can be used, from small 8-ounce glass bottles to large half-gallon jugs. Maple syrup should be canned while hot at about 180 degrees Fahrenheit or higher to kill all bacteria. And then it needs to be stored in a cool, dry place. After a container is opened, it must be refrigerated to prevent mold growth. The procedure we just used is intended for home production of maple syrup. If maple syrup is to be marketed, grading and labeling standards are required for retail sale in most maple syrup producing states. We have now reached the end of our tour. We thank you for letting us help you experience how this wonderful maple syrup comes to be. We hope you now have a great appreciation for this pure, natural sweetener, and now know how this amazing taste has come from the tree to your table.
Honorable timekeeper, this concludes our presentation. Our resources are included on our PowerPoint. We will now answer any questions the judges may have.
Based upon the weather patterns we've had this year, is this going to be a good year or a bad year for maple production, maple syrup production?
Because of the weather this year, it's actually going to be a bad year because you actually need a frozen winter to actually get good concentration of sugar in your sap. Right now, the sugar concentration in the sap is very low, making it very hard to create syrup because you need a lot more sap, and the taste isn't as sweet.
What kind of a price would you be looking at for a reverse osmosis system for personal consumption batches, if you
The price for the reverse osmosis can typically go to about 10 grand, which is quite a lot, and it's worth it if you're producing enough maple syrup.
When you're using the tube collection, can you reuse those tubes?
Yes, you can reuse the tubes as long as you cleanse them and they're still well maintained and have no holes in them.
And is there a certain procedure that you need to cleanse those with?
Well, you cleanse them with pressurized water. That's one of the easiest ways to use. You don't want to use soap because it can get in the tubing.
When you package the final product, is there any other additives or preservatives to maintain shelf life that may be used?
No, there are no more additives or preservatives that are used in the canning of maple syrup. It's all natural.
You mentioned that there would be grading and labeling regulations should you take it to market versus personal consumption. Who specifically would regulate that? The grading and the labeling?
The Food and Drug Administration of Michigan usually regulates that, and there's 3 grading scales, which is A, B, and C. And the A is usually the best, and usually you use it on your oatmeal or on your pancakes. The B is not quite as good, and it has somewhat of a buddy taste. And the C is typically only used for like flavoring tobacco or alcohol.
If I had just a 40-acre woodlot with 2 maple trees and I just wanted to do this for personal consumption, about how much would I have to invest to get the process going?
Well, if you had a 40-acre woodlot, you would approximately have to spend about $2,000 to start off at having approximately 80 taps in there, because you would need to get a batch evaporator, which costs about $1,200 to $1,500, and then you need to get all the taps and all the other equipment, such as the hydrometer, which would make the cost be typically about $2,000.
How many taps would you put in a tree that size per year?
Well, with this tree and how big it was, you could probably put about 3 taps in it, but you don't want to go any more than that because it can damage the tree and the sap quality.
And as you know, we have maybe a slow sap season, and if I'm trying to refrigerate some sap so I can get enough to get going, what is my storage like in a refrigerator?
Typically, you do not want to refrigerate the sap over 3 days because after a while the sap will start to spoil and it won't be as good quality.